Hello class, my name is Orlando Echeverria and I'm going to be discussing our first chapter that we have been assigned to read. It's National Security Problems in International Relations by Mr. Barry Buzan. This chapter was actually very appealing. I learned a lot about security. I feel like it was very appropriate in order to start the class, and this is pretty much what took place and what it's about. So basically, as the class pertains, it's about security. It's basically the first chapter starts off, the prologue or the introduction, one may say. It's just telling us about what the importance of security and how it affects basically everyone in every single level, whether it's an international, state, or local, or just personal level. Security affects you in each and every way. I'm here looking at some notes that I took to kind of get it. So basically, just kind of to foreshadow on what I'll be talking about later in the past, many states actually in their quest for security, they end up getting many other things that actually leads to contest with other states and other individual actors, and most of the time it's done incorrectly and it actually leads to many problems. So to start off, two generalist schools that are kind of going back and forth when it comes to security. I want to kind of get into them and explain them. First is the realist school of international relations, and the idealist school of international relations. Their notion of security is very different from one another. So basically, the realist school of international relations is very hardcore. It's get your militia, get your defenses in your state, do anything in your possibility to just worry about yourself as an individual state being on top of all the other states around us. The name kind of describes itself as a realist school, so they're kind of very hardcore about it. Hence, the complete opposite, the realist school of international relations. And this is all pertaining to the concept of security. They all have their own individual ideas, but when it comes to security, the realist school is completely opposite. They're basically saying if we keep the necessary factors in order to keep peace in our society, then peace will follow around us as one. There wouldn't be any problems. So one could see how the two different schools have very different notions of security. And basically, what this chapter is arguing is that security in itself is. There's actually an excerpt from the book, from a page in the chapter, is arguing that security in itself is a lot more versatile and useful way of approaching the study of international relations when it comes to looking at power and peace. One important thing that I want to get into is the security dilemma that's mentioned. I'm gonna get into this a little bit later too, but basically the security dilemma is just saying how anarcho states that are just completely focused on security, what they do is they increase their militia, their weapons, they make alliances with people around them in order to keep security, but in fact what this is doing is actually pushing the actors around them to develop their own alliances and their own things, and then war starts out. A very similar real world example of this security dilemma could be in the World War II. The Axis powers and the Allied powers, they ended up going at war with each other. At first, the alliances were just to keep security in the state, and all the little alliances that each of the individual countries had with each other in order to keep peace just ended up brokering out a full-out world war. So basically, keeping on with the chapter, he's just the author, Buzan, is just trying to get us to understand the scope of the complexity of the idea of security. There's not really anything that can explain. There's not one particular factor that pushes it on top of anything. There's not one example. There's not one certain definition that explains security. So it's a very complex topic, especially when it comes to international relations, because there are so many factors at play. One thing that always tends to happen, one huge mistake that tends to happen when speaking about security, is that people just tend to focus on the empirical and policy-oriented horizons, whether that be in the military or the politics at home. When it comes to security, is a lot more bigger than that. One example of security being used in one way that many people just like to point out is in the political aspect. They say that security is based on the political activities inside a country, but that can be very wrong. In the book, the author describes about how about how security can be used many times as a scapegoat in order to start a war, in order to start problems with other actors. Hence, they're hurting us, they're a threat to our security, we need to attack them, when there's really no threat. Politicians use the term of security in order to start many problems. So basically what the author is trying to do is trying to push the reader away from the traditional concept of security and advance on what the topic of security really is. In order to, basically what he's saying, in order to really understand what security is, one has to move away from the traditional thought that it's basically just depending on the economy of a state and the military policy. If that were so, one would look at the United States as an example and think it will be the more secure state in the world. It has a very good economy. It has the strongest military in the world. Yet our security here as homeless civilians is deteriorated almost every single day with threats of school shootings. We had one at FIU. So one can't just look at these traditional concepts of what constitutes security. You have to look at kind of a lot of other things around them. He describes 5 factors that collectively you can have a solid understanding of what security can be, but it's not a comprehensible one. But the 5 factors are as if he'll be talking about the military, political, economic, societal, and environmental factors. I think all of these play a huge role directly into what security is. Basically, the military, political, and economic, those are, the run-of-the-mill ones. You gotta have these good 3 institutions to be working in order to have security. But the other 2 that I find very important is the societal and environmental. We all know the huge problem going on right now with global warming and how no country or actor in the international community is acting upon it except smaller countries, and I feel like that plays a huge role in the security of our nation and the security of the world, and not many scholars will bother even looking at that. And the societal, I mentioned this before, but I mean, look at our society now. You got to understand the society of an independent actor and the problems that it causes to security, like school shootings, in order to really get a comprehensive understanding. The author tries to describe the different definitions that other experts have on security, but he basically just pushes them away, saying the semantic definitions of security is just not enough to really describe what's going on. You can't look at it in a way of just what it is. I mean, if you're gonna look at it, basically security is just a very self-explainable word, something that's secure and something that's not. But when it comes to the international relations, it's a very complex subject. And that's basically where he finishes off. He states at the end that international security studies should not be a part should not be a part of the international studies as a whole. It should just remain for the experts on the military aspects, because it's such a complicated topic, and if we had to put it in the whole thing of international relations, it would just be too much animosity between the 2 schools of thoughts, and it should just be a topic for military experts. I think that his outlook of what security is a very objective way of looking at it. I believe that it differs from state to state, country to country, and one can't really have a solid understanding of what security is in agreement with the author itself. I think the 5 factors he mentioned before are very good and already determine the security of an individual state. But when it comes to security in international relations, I don't think there's one correct definition or one correct formula or a certain way of looking at it that will really let you understand the security of a region or the international community as a whole. You never know what's going to happen, and then I'm a firm believer of the security dilemma. Even when people are the most secure, it ends up always going back. We've had world wars, the Romans, people always want more and more. Human greed is real now more than ever. So I definitely agree with the author on that the concept of security cannot just be given a solid definition or described. It's a broader subject. And that is my overview of chapter 1. Thank you so much, and I look forward to doing another one of this. Thank you, Professor, and thank you to my classmates.